Thank you. Good morning, AI Engineer Paris. My name is Meryl Lutsky, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Graphite. Today, I'm excited to share a behind-the-scenes look at how we taught our agent, Graphite Chat, how to review code like a senior engineer. So a bit of quick background. At Graphite, we're building the AI-powered code review platform for this new age of agentic software development. We believe that all of these AI dev tools need a new code review platform that can help teams generate or review code just as quickly as they can now generate it, and that's exactly what we're building. Graphite Chat is our latest expression of this vision. Graphite Chat is an agent that lives right in your code review interface, right alongside you as you review. So in this case, I've now opened a PR. This PR syncs perfectly with GitHub. I've opened this in Graphite. And the reason why I do this on Graphite's platform is that I can now interact with Chat. So let's say I want to ask Chat, hey, are there any performance issues in this PR? Chat can now go ahead and scan the PR, review for any of these issues, and flag them for me in real time. And better yet, I can just ask Chat, hey, let's swap out DALL-E 2 with DALL-E 3, and it will go ahead, make these edits live. I can then open them in an editor in the browser, which I'll show you here. I can click this open. I can see exactly the edits that Chat has made. And then with one click, I can commit these suggestions and integrate them into my PR. This is just some of the magic that we can do now with Chat. Another example that I'll show you here is, let's say that you have some failed CI checks, probably something that happens to everyone on pull requests. I could, with one click, say fix with Chat, and collaborating with this agent, I can now fix my failed CI. It'll suggest a set of fixes, and once again, I can, with one click, click to apply them. So this is pretty cool. We're really excited about the potential of this interface, but I want to talk about three key questions that went into building Chat. First of all, why does code review matter today? Secondly, why not just use Claude? And then finally, how did we actually get this to review like a senior engineer does? So let's start with the first question. Why does code review matter now? And I think the best way to answer this is that everyone who's written code as part of a team knows that writing the code is only the first part of the story. We have in the software development lifecycle the inner loop, which is focused on building, like coding, building locally, debugging. But once we've done all of this, we still need to go through the entire outer loop, which is where review and collaboration and validation happen. At scale, this outer loop becomes more of the bottleneck. My co-founders and I all had the experience of working at large companies like Square and Meta and Google before. And we had the experience of having to wait sometimes days to get a PR through review. And oftentimes it would take us longer to go through the review process than it would to actually write the code in the first place. And now with AI, this problem is 10 times worse. Because now every engineer has amazing tools like Cursor or Claude Code or Windsurf that help them write code faster than ever. But we still have the same set of tooling that we're trying to use to unblock review. I thought that this tweet summed it up really well. The new bottleneck is no longer doing the work, it is reviewing the work. And that's why the age of agentic software development needs AI code review. So that takes us through question one, why does this matter right now? But I think probably the spicier question that everyone had walking into this is, why didn't we just use Claude or ChatGPT or some of these other amazing models that we have? We could just throw the raw intelligence of these at PRs, just give them the git diff and see what happens, right? Well, this is actually what we thought as well when we started this project. And the very first way that we prototyped this was by taking our git diff and giving it to Claude. And we asked, hey, Claude, can you help me find some bugs in this PR? And these are some of the results that you get if you do that. First, you get things like, you should update this code to do what it already does. Or something like this, where it says CSS doesn't work this way, but it actually does. Or better yet, you should add a comment to explain what this function is doing. Or you should just revert the code to do what it used to do. And I think anyone, if you want to try this, this has been the case since Sonnet 3.5. You can try this right now if you have a git diff. Try it, put it in, see what happens. The result is really much more like if you just dropped an intern into your code base with no context and asked it to be helpful. So that's kind of led us to our fundamental realization here. is that LLMs are trained to write code. Getting them to review code is a much harder challenge. And the reason, if you think about this, like so much of the training data that goes into these LLMs, it's about how is this code written, they're RL'd on writing code, like the models are, if anything, just getting better and better at the writing side of this, but not necessarily the reviewing side. So that was our challenge. How can we architect our agent to be a much better reviewer? So that brings us to this third question. And to do this, I think we had to solve two really key challenges in order to get Graphite Chat to behave like a senior engineer. First challenge is really around context engineering. Code review requires a ton of context to do right. You need to know what's the intention behind the change. You need to know like the history, the risks involved. I think senior engineers have this great intuition for what is a risky change and what isn't, what they need to pay attention to. But all of this context is so big, we can't fit it into our context window, and that really forces us to be strategic about what we give the model as it's evaluating and as it's reviewing. Context rot is very real. If we try to just stuff this all in, we're not going to get a good result. So Graphite's solution to this is really to act like a human reviewer. We took the design principle of let's try to make this, given that LLMs are trained on human-like data, on human-generated data, let's try to make this as human-like as possible in how it behaves. So the way that we do that is we just fetch the context as we need it. By default, chat sees what's on the PR page just like a human reviewer would. So you get the code diff, you get the PR description, open comments, anything that's visible by default. And then we give chat tools so that it can pull in the additional context as needed as it's discovering things that it wants to explore more. So you'll see in some of those logs it was reading files. It could pull in CI logs if there's a failure. It can read Git history and past comments. All of this it's pulling in and exploring the code base, similar to how a human reviewer might explore a code base as you're looking through. You might pull the code base locally and look through it. You might look through through documentation or other pieces. Another piece here is that chat can connect to MCPs and pull in from Notion or from Linear or from any other sources of context that you might have, just to give it a sense of like why is this PR important, what is it doing, and what do I need to look out for as I'm reviewing this. The second key challenge here is that LLMs are really trained to work on file systems. Looking at how something like Claude Code works, it's really at its best when it has, when you have a local working directory, it's traversing the file system, it's really building an understanding of what the code base is doing. And this is all great when you're working in an IDE, but the problem is that when you try to do this with a pull request, you don't actually have a file system. PRs fundamentally are just a set of code diffs on files, and there's no real understanding there of how they relate to each other unless you build that on top of it. So that was the biggest challenge that we had, especially because we wanted to make this collaborative. Chat is not, there are a lot of AI code review companies that are doing just like a one-time scan, scan the PR, add comments on GitHub, and then that's it. But we wanted this to feel, like a collaborator that's on 24/7, that you can always work with. And to do that, we needed to build a place for the humans and for Graphite Chat to collaborate. Here's another view of the challenge. Like, again, working with an agent locally, you have both the working directory where you're putting all of your potential changes, and you also have your Git history of what you've actually committed. However, thinking about Graphite Chat on the web, you have what's been committed to remote, which you can load in, but again, you don't really have a place for any of these potential changes to go. And that was one of the biggest inhibitors when we started this to building a collaborative experience between agents and humans. So that was our solution to this, is we built a virtual file system in the browser. We actually, we recreate a rendition of the file system. We give that, and we keep track of the diff as we're editing, and that way we have now a space for you to collaborate in real time. This is kind of a trick and an artifact of the training of these models, is that they're really trained on traversing file systems and do best when you give it to this. So again, an interesting piece of context engineering is just how do we make this look as familiar as possible to the LLM based on what it's trained on. And by building this file system, this is basically the way that we do this. So how does this look when we put it all together? How do we edit a PR collaboratively in the browser now with Graphite Chat? This is kind of the workflow that we ended up on. So when I showed you that demo, the user asked Graphite Chat to go ahead and make an edit. When we did that, Graphite Chat then pulled in all of the files that were touched by that PR. So it made those tool calls, it pulled in the right context that it needed, it explored the code base. It then generated the requested edits. One thing I'll mention here is that the Graphite Chat is really good at, Graphite Chat is really good at actually making the edits because we implemented it as a find and replace, which actually works a lot better than just asking it to like regenerate the entire file. So we make those requested edits really surgically. And then the key thing here is we're tracking those edits as a patch file in the browser between the committed and current state. So every time we make that, we update the patch file, we store those edits, we store the state and the diff between what we have committed and what you're working on with chat. And then with every subsequent message, we're feeding that back into chat. So if you ask it to make subsequent updates, chat has all the context on what you've changed already. You have that collaborative experience where you can keep making edits until you finally commit it, and then you can reset the committed state, or the local state to the committed state. So that's kind of the full round trip of Graphite Chat. A few things that I want to leave you with as key takeaways here. Number one, reviewing is really a fundamentally different activity than generating. It requires a lot more context. It requires much more organizational history. There's so much more that goes into building that senior engineering level of intuition that you have for doing good code review than you need, than you need for just writing code. And the models are really well optimized for generating code, but giving them that level of context and giving them the way to think about PRs above that requires a lot more than what the models have out of the box. Related to this, context and focus are really beating raw intelligence. You can't just give a PR, give a git diff to the model and expect it to perform really well. You have to really give it the right amount of context at the right time, give it tools to discover that context and pull it in, and then you can really get a result that rivals that of a human engineer. Finally, I think related to this, if you want an agent to review like a human, you really need to do that orchestration, think about how it interacts with the world and with that PR. And all this really speaks to our vision at Graphite. We believe that by closely integrating the code review platform and the agent, we're able to provide both the context and the tooling to make this future of human AI collaboration feel seamless and to unblock teams to review just as quickly as they can now generate code. One stat that I'll leave you with, I know that we didn't get to Dario's prediction of 90% of code generated by AI by this point, but one thing that we have seen is that every engineer, compared to 2023, every engineer that we see and have analytics on is producing about 70% more lines of code now than they were in 2023. So the boost of AI productivity is real. The amount of PRs and the amount of code that needs to be reviewed is only going to get higher, and that's really why we believe that tools like Graphite Chat are fundamental to really enabling and unlocking the true productivity potential of AI code generation tools. That's all that I have for you today. I'm excited to answer any more questions about Graphite Chat. Thank you all for listening.